What you really love in the dog, you can't see. And we're talking about dogs now, but we could talk about any life form, including humans, but let's talk about dog. What is it when you look into the eyes of the dog and there is an inner response which is love? And this is why it's easier for many people to look into the eyes of a dog and feel love than it is to look into the eyes of the human and feel love. There are millions of people who find it easier to feel love looking into the eyes of a dog. And that is because there's less in the way when they look at the dog. There's less that obstructs the dog's connectedness with the source, which is the one. In humans, there's the mind in the way. So many people find it harder to feel love when they look at a human being. Perhaps they may have one or two with whom they do feel it, but many don't even have that. Why? Because in the other human, there is a screen of concepts, and that activates your own screen of judgments and concepts. And that prevents the flow and the realization of oneness from happening. The moment you look at a human, most humans are, we'll come back to dogs in a minute, but don't worry. Most humans are trapped in mental noise, continuous judgments in the mind, stories, judgments. So if you could free yourself from that, it requires enormous presence and for your own thought structures not to become activated when you look into the eyes of a human being whose mind is very, very active. So that requires great presence, and not many people have that yet. So there are millions of people in this world whose the only being for whom they can feel love is their dog. You could say, oh, that's tragic, isn't it? Well, it's not tragic, at least they can feel love there. At least, of course, it would be wonderful if you could feel love for humans also. A little bit more difficult, possible and necessary ultimately. But we know now what the barriers are. Once we know why we can't feel the love for humans, then we can do something which is relinquish our judgments. But it remains for the time being that dogs provide an access for many humans into feeling the connectedness with being. That is why I call them sometimes guardians of being. Dog, you feel that the dog's connectedness with the source. In a way, then you could say the dog, or any animal really, is closer to the source than humans, closer to God. Humans have gone further out into further differentiation and complexity. And there you have the dog, but there's enough consciousness in the dog to meet the human. The dog is already quite close to the human consciousness, without having suffered yet the influx of conceptualization. So that's the beauty of it. So what you love in the dog is not ultimately the external form. You love in the dog that which has no form, their consciousness. And that can connect you with your own consciousness. That the consciousness is indestructible. The essence of the dog remains. Where exactly it goes, I don't know. But it may go into the universal dog essence that underlies the divine idea of dog. Plato would have said something like that, or Socrates. The cinema film in the cinema projector, when you put a film is put in the projector, I don't know whether they still do it, but there's a film, there's a light behind the film, and the film runs through the projector. and that creates the images on the screen. Now, all the reality that these images on the screen ultimately have is the light behind the film. Without the light behind the film, there would be nothing happening there. Now imagine a character in that, we're taking this analogy a little bit further, almost too far, but let's do it. Let's imagine the characters in the film who are acting out their drama and conditioning. It may be a tragedy or a comedy or a mixture, but the characters are all acting out their script, talking. Let's say one of the characters suddenly becomes aware that, what is my reality? There's a moment of cessation that he or she is not acting out the script. He stops for a moment and can suddenly feel that light shining through and say, oh, I'm really that light. I'm not ultimately that character. See, the light gives it, and so all the figures in the movie are ways of obscuring to a greater or lesser extent the light that comes through. But their aliveness is the light. Without the light, it's nothing. Okay, let's go back to the tapestry. There we have a form has dissolved. Now, at first, if you concentrate on the lack of what was there that was so lovely, then you get stuck on that level where you equate the loveliness and the love with the form that has dissolved. But if you look more deeply, then you see that where that form was, there's actually now more light shining through. And that happens when you completely surrender to the fact of death. Whether it's a human or a dog, any form of life, when you completely surrender to the fact of death, then you're not just sad because the form has dissolved, that may still be there, but you also sense a deepening in yourself because you sense that where the form was, the light now shines through more fully. So the empty space that's left behind, this is why death is ultimately, potentially, always sacred. There are remnants of this when, in ancient cultures, when people see a dead body. In our culture, of course, you don't because we hide them. When they see a dead body, they make a sign of respect, even if they dislike the person that just died. But when the coffin comes past and it's open, there's the dead body, they show respect. Because there's some obscure recognition of the sacredness of death. Why is death considered sacred? Because when the form dissolves, the formless can shine through more strongly, and then it can be transformative in you, but it requires surrender to the fact of death. And so it can be a transformative thing, which doesn't mean you're not sad anymore. You're still sad because the form has dissolved. But if you go into complete acceptance of the fact of death, which is going to happen to you, this form, to this form, and this, 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 and this. Each form is going to pop sooner or later. Some sooner, some later, and leave behind